Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Got
All
it.
right. So we're going to take a look. Chapter 1, verse 1. In the days when chieftains ruled. These are the shoftim. These are the rulers who, in a series of them, one after another, who led the people or coalitions of the tribes, not all of them, but in each case, a different group of tribes to fight against an enemy, largely the Philistines, as it goes on. So this is the time before the monarchy. If you think about American history, it was like the time before the Constitution, when we had the Articles of Confederation, each individual state. And in that period of time, charismatic military leaders who were known as judges rose to the challenge when Israel was attacked. So in those days, there was a famine, and a man of Bethlehem in Judah with his wife and 2 sons went to reside in the country of Moab. Now, I want to point out where they live. They live in Beit Lechem, Yehudah. In other words, in Bethlehem, in the place where the tribe of Judah had its allocation. But Bethlehem literally means the house of bread. And we'll see here an irony, right? Lechem is bread. We'll see an irony in that what will happen to them is that they are going to have to leave and go to Moab, the adjoining area, kingdom, because of this famine. And what we're now given their names. Shem Ha'ish Elimelech, the man's name was Elimelech. His wife's name was Naomi or Naomi. And his 2 sons are Machlon and Chilion, and they were Ephraimites of Bethlehem in Judah. And they came to the country of Moab and remained there. So we get their names, and names will become important. What's going to happen now, though, is quite dramatic. Elimelech, Naomi's husband, dies, and she was left with 2 sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other Ruth. They lived there for 10 years. And then these 2, Machlon and Chilion, also died, so that the woman was left without her sons and without her husband. And so the commentaries here pick up on this terrible tragedy that occurs to Naomi, losing not only her husband, but her sons, and ask what this family could have done wrong to deserve this. Now, of course, the underlying notion here is that when bad things happen to good people, it must in some sense be their fault. This idea, of course, is completely repudiated in the book of Job, where Job is a righteous man and terrible things happen to him. It's very clear there that it's not his fault. But the rabbis looking at this and the Midrash looking at this says, well, Elimelech was a wealthy man. And we know that. He's a leader of the community, and he leaves during famine. And so why does he leave? The Midrash says, because he has much grain that he has amassed over the years, and now during the period of famine, he would be able not only to sustain himself, but to sustain the people of the community of Bethlehem, and he doesn't want to do it. So there is a kind of a lack of chesed, of kindness, of mercy that leads him to go off to Moab. The rabbis here being sensitive to the fact that this whole story is about kindness and mercy. At any rate, the text doesn't tell us why they left, except that there was famine. And immediately the husband dies and the 2 sons die. And the names of the sons are somewhat telling. They both reflect, in some sense, injury or illness. So it's been suggested that these are really symbolic names. And the whole story, which is after all being written much, much later, right? Later even than the time of King David, right? Generations later, as we'll see at the end of the story, there's a real question as to whether it really happened at all. That perhaps this is a simple tale which has been written to make a point. Anyway, they die, and the two wives are left now, Orpah and Ruth. And so Naomi now says, she starts out with her daughter-in-laws to return from the country of Moab. For in the country of Moab, she had heard that the Lord has taken note of his people and given them food. And one thing I just point out here about the language, because the language here is beautiful. Latet lahem lechem, at the end of this verse, to give them food. But notice the kind of alliteration.
La la la.
Yeah, la 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 is right. Okay. So she starts out with her daughters. She goes from the place where she had been living. They go on the road back to the land of Judah, back to the Israelites. And Naomi now says to her daughter-in-laws, go and return each woman to the house of her mother. Each of you go back to your mother's house. And may the Lord bring you chesed, kindness, right? And this word chesed comes up again and again because this book is a story about chesed. It's about loving kindness, both of Ruth for her mother-in-law and also eventually of Boaz for her, right? And therefore, may God deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead, plural, and with me, right? So she's dismissing them. She's telling them that they should go back, and may the Lord grant that each of you find security in the house of a husband, right? So go marry someone else and find menucha. Menucha is rest, right? Find a settled place in the house of a husband, and she kisses them and they start to cry. And they say, no, we will go with you to your people. And then she says, go back again, she says, why should you go with me? Have I any more sons in my body who would be husbands for you? Right? She's indicating that she's beyond that age. They deserve to be settled women in their own houses. Go back. I'm too old, she says. Even if I thought there was hope for me, even if I could bear children, another one, even if I were married tonight and I also bore sons, should you wait for them to grow up? Should you, on their account, debar yourselves from marriage? Oh no, my daughters. And it is striking that she refers to them as her daughters, right? Right? She says, my lot is far more bitter than yours. Right? They've lost their husbands, but they have a future. For the hand of the Lord has struck against me. Right? In Hebrew, ki yatzah vi yad Adonai. So she sees what's happened to her as a kind of punishment from God. She's fallen out of favor with God. And that is perhaps an additional source of bitterness for her. She's not only lost her husband and her sons, but she feels rejected by God. And she has now twice told them to go back, right? And they break into weeping, and Orpah kisses her mother-in-law farewell, but Ruth clings to her, right? Ruth is clinging to Naomi. And here the language is striking. Orpah means literally the back of the neck. So we have this sense, just as the sons have symbolic names, perhaps Orpah's name is symbolic because that's what she's showing her mother-in-law, and she is doing what she was asked to do. Ruth davkabo, right? She clings to her. Like, and the Hebrew word in modern Hebrew, glue, is devek, right? Something really sticky, adhering. I'm also struck by the sense that there is, at the beginning of Genesis, it says, and there al ken yazov ish et aviv imo v'davak beishto. That therefore, and this is after the creation of human beings, therefore a man should leave his father and his mother and cling to his wife, that they be one flesh, right? So here we have this image of Ruth clinging to Naomi. And she says, look, your sister-in-law has returned to her people and her gods, right? She's gone back. So follow your sister-in-law. And in a minute, we're going to get this very famous speech of Ruth's. But before then, I just want to take note of the fact that Naomi has told Ruth 3 times to leave her, 3 times to go back. The first 2 times along with Orpah, and here now again. And the rabbis see that as very significant in light of the statement that Ruth is going to make. So let's see what that statement is, perhaps the most famous statement in the book of Ruth. Ruth says, don't urge me to leave you, to go back from you. And then she says, for wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Right? So she is categorically stating that she is not going to leave. She will be with her forever. If you go back to the next state, where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Thus and more may the Lord do to me, if anything but death parts me from you, right? So it's a kind of vow she makes when she says, thus and more may God do to me. So this looks like conversion, right? Because she's not only saying to her mother-in-law, I'm not leaving you, I'm sticking with you, literally sticking, right? But she also says, your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. And a person who converts to Judaism essentially is saying that the Jewish people will be their people and the God of Israel will be their God. And the rabbis look at this, and from this story, they devise, or I would say interpret the story to teach us one of the rules for conversion. And there are several, but one of them is that the convert should be discouraged 3 times, just as Naomi discourages Ruth 3 times. Now, it's worth noting that this idea of a formal process of conversion doesn't seem to have existed in biblical times. That you would go through a ceremony, that there would be a rabbi, that there would be a beit din, a kind of court to accept you, that you need to be rejected, and so on. They're reading that into this story. Things seem to have been much more porous. A person could choose to become part of the people and accept the God, and perhaps that was enough. But here I want to remind you of that verse in Deuteronomy that I read earlier, and I'm going to reread it now, just because I think at this point it becomes even clearer. No Moabite shall be admitted to the congregation of the Lord. None of their descendants, even to the 10th generation, should be admitted. Right? And why? Because they showed you no chesed. They didn't give you food or water on your journey. Right? So here she is saying, your people will be my people. Right? That essentially I will be part of that congregation of the Lord, the community of Israel, something which the book of Deuteronomy absolutely categorically forbids until the 10th generation, right? And I'll come back to the idea of the 10th generation later on. So where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried, she swears to her. And when Naomi sees how determined she was to go with her, she ceased to argue with her, and the two went on until they reached Bethlehem. Now, when they come to Bethlehem, the whole city is buzzing with excitement, and the women say, Hazot Naomi? Could this be Naomi? Right, remember it's been years, 10 years, that she was in Moab, but we're going to get there's another way of reading this, and that is looking at her and not recognizing her entirely. Could this be Naomi? Not just because of the time that has passed, but also because she has been changed, deeply changed by her experience. And now she is going to explain that. Don't call me Naomi, call me Mara, bitterness, right? Just like maror on the bitter herbs we eat, right? Mara, for Shaddai, and an ancient name for God, has made my lot very bitter, right? Naomi is pleasantness, but this name doesn't even apply to me anymore. I went out, she says, I left full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. That's a very strange statement, because they left during famine, right? So what does it mean that she left full? Well, she had her husband and her sons, and now she has come back with empty, right? And this idea of fullness and emptiness becomes one of the themes of this story. And God has dealt harshly with me and brought misfortune upon me, right? Thus, she returned from the country of Moab. She returned with her daughter-in-law. And notice she doesn't mention Ruth at all, right? It's like Ruth isn't there. She is so overcome by her own misery. She can't even see this remarkable daughter-in-law who has accompanied her and been with her. So they come to Bethlehem, and it's the beginning. When do they come? It's at the beginning of the barley harvest. And now I am going to I want to, where are we here? I'm looking to figure out how to do this. I want to change the view. See if I can do it here. No, what is this? Wait.
Stop share.
Oh, pause share. Very good. There it is. Okay. So we finished chapter 1. And I want to ask you if you have any questions, anything at all that struck you during chapter 1. The first stage of the story took place in Moab. And now we're going to be back in Bethlehem. Go ahead, Hannah.
Am I on? You can hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea what the sons' names meant? The Machlon and
Yeah, I don't remember exactly, but I could, give me a second.
Machala is sickness. I don't know if that.
Right. Well, that's what we're talking about. These are names that seem predictive of their fate. Any other comments? Saul, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I was thinking of it when you were reading Ki pakad Adonai et amo latet lahem lechem. V'Adonai pakad et Sarah. The same word.
This sense of remembering the people, right? And with that remembrance, for Sarah, of course, comes the son, this long-awaited son. And here there's a sense of deliverance, I think. God remembers and God delivers. Good. Anything else before we go on? Yeah, Myra.
Okay, I'm interested in the fact that the Bible doesn't have much about women. And here they give like a whole book about her.
Yes.
Is there a reason, a special reason why?
I don't know. I will say the book of Esther is also a book about
separate.
Women are, we do have, I agree with you, but I do want to say this isn't the only exception. In the book of Judges, we have the whole story of Deborah, which goes on for a couple of chapters, actually. And then we have also in the book of Samuel, we find out about Hannah. And there too, she's a major figure. Several chapters with the birth of her son, Samuel. But it's unusual. It's unusual. Some modern scholars think this might have been written by a woman. I don't know that there's any basis for saying that, but the focus clearly is on women here, and really will be throughout, and that's striking. Yeah. Anything else? Maddie, do you have your hand up?
No.
Okay. Anybody else before we move on to chapter 2, where the action now moves to Bethlehem? Let me, I'm going to change the view, and I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, so Naomi had a kinsman on her husband's side, a man of substance. The language here is Gibor Chayil, right? There's a sense of an important figure, right? And he was from the family of Elimelech, her husband, and his name is Boaz. Now, Ruth says to Ruth the Moabite. The text is going to go on and on when she's now in Bethlehem to call her the Moabite, right? It could just say Ruth said to Naomi, we know who she is, right? But this sense that she is a Moabite gets repeated again and again. And I remind you again of this idea that a Moabite cannot enter the congregation of the Lord, right? So Ruth the Moabite says to Naomi, I would like to go to the fields and glean among the ears of corn behind someone who will show me, and the word here is chesed, right? Again, someone who will actually it's not chesed, it's chen. I'm sorry. Chen, which is synonymous with hesed. We have actually a triad, chen v'chesed v'rachamim are often come together and they are synonyms. Okay. And she says, go, my daughter. Right? So now Ruth is beginning to recognize Naomi, and she even calls her daughter, a language which will be also repeated by Boaz. And what she wants to do is to glean. I would remind you, the law is that if you own land, you are not entitled to take everything from it. In some sense, the land belongs to God. And specifically, there are three things that you have to leave for the poor. One is that you don't harvest the corners of the fields; they belong to the poor. The second is if you forget, leave behind one of the sheaves of grain in the field, you're not supposed to go back and get it. The poor should have it. And finally, the gleanings, right? When they are harvesting, they don't get every drop. And you're supposed to leave it there so that the poor can follow and, in a sense, re-harvest your field, what's left. Notice that they need gleanings, so they have to be hungry, right? But Naomi seems to be, she's stuck. You could say she's depressed. She doesn't act. And so Ruth says, I want to go do this. And she asks it, right? She says, Elchadna, please let me go, right? And Naomi says, yes, go. So she goes. And she came and gleaned in a field behind the reapers, right? And as luck would have it, it was a piece of land belonging to Boaz, who was from the family of Elimelech, from her father-in-law's family. Now, the statement here is Vayiker Mikra. A thing happened. There's a sense of luck here, happenstance, but remember the sense that God had, and Naomi talked about how God had abandoned them. And behind this event, we perhaps see some kind of divine providence, because going to this field, the field of this man, will bring redemption, both in a symbolic way, but as we're going to see, in a very, very literal way as well. So Boaz comes back from Bethlehem and he sees the reapers. And look at the way he talks to them. He says, Adonai imachem, may God be with you. And they say, Yivarechecha Adonai, and may God bless you, right? So this is a little bit of dialogue, but it tells us about the kind of man Boaz is, that God talk is his servant, right? It's just not, hey guys, how you doing? Glad to see you're working hard, right? He says to them, may God be with you, and they say, God bless you. And Boaz says to the servant in charge of the reapers, right? Lemi hana'ara hazot. Whose girl is that? And he's clearly talking about Ruth, as we'll see in a second, right? Who does she belong to? Right? Ultimately, she's going to belong to him. Right? Who does she belong to? And the servant in charge of the reapers says, she's a Moabite. Is Na'ara Moaviyah. She's a Moabite, right? And she's the one who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. She said, let me glean and gather among the reapers, the sheaves. She's been on her feet ever since she came this morning. She has rested but little, right? So she's working really hard. And Boaz says to Ruth, listen to me, BT, my daughter, right? So just as Naomi had called her daughter here, Boaz is doing that. This is a term of affection and respect. Don't go anywhere else. Stay here close to my girls. Keep your eyes on the field they are reaping and follow them. I have ordered the men not to molest you. When you're thirsty, go to the jars and drink some of the water that the men have drawn, right? So he is saying, don't go somewhere else, stay here, and I'll make sure that you're safe. And I'll make sure that you have water. right? He is looking after her, caring for her. And also the idea that the men should not molest her suggests that there's a certain danger here for her, and he's going to ensure her safety. And she prostrates herself on the ground. She bows to him and she says, "Why are you so kind to me? I am a foreigner." And he says, "I've been told all that you did for your mother-in-law after the death of your husband, how you left your father and your mother, the land of your birth, and came to a people that you had not known." Now, there is here a kind of an echo of another text. Remember Abraham, and God says at the beginning of Lech Lecha, when we're first Avram, right? He says, "Leave your land, your native land, your everything, and go to the land that I will show you." And here, you left your father and your mother and came to the people you had not. Right? So Boaz is seeing her in this kind of heroic almost way. And finally, again, he talks about God. "May the Lord reward your deeds. May you have a full recompense from the Lord, the God of Israel." Right. "Asher bat l'chasot takat knafav," that you have come to find refuge under God's wings, right? So this idea of a kind of protective wing. Now, I want you to remember this phrase because we're going to see it a little bit later. But this language also is used with respect to conversion later on. There's a way of referring to a convert as someone who has come under God's wings, and it comes from here. Okay, she answered, "You're most kind, my Lord, to comfort me, to speak gently to me." And it's translated here as gently, but look at the Hebrew. Ki dibarta alev shivchatcha, right? You've spoken to the heart. You've spoken to the heart of your servant, though I am not so much as one of your maidservants. I'm not even one of your maidservants. You don't owe me anything. And now at mealtime, Boaz says to her, "Come here, partake of the meal," right? "Dip your morsel in the vinegar." He's been giving her food. He's been giving her water, right? Remember the Moabites and how the Moabites had refused to give. Why can they not come into the community of Israel? Because they refused to provide them with food and water so that they could travel through their territory. He hands her roasted grain. She eats her fill and she has some left over. And when she goes to glean, Boaz gives orders to his workers. "You should let her glean without interference, but pull out also some stalks out of the heap, leave them for her to glean," right? Be very sloppy. Leave her some to glean. And she gleans till evening. She beats out what she had gleaned, and it's an ephah of barley, right? Quite a bit. She carries it back with her to town. When her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned, and when she also took out and gave her what she had left after her eating her fill, her mother-in-law says to her, "Where did you glean? Where did you work? Blessed be he who took such notice of you." And Hebrew, right, that this person is to be blessed, just as Boaz had been blessed. And she says, "Oh, the guy's name was Boaz." And Naomi says to her daughter-in-law, "Blessed be he of the Lord," right? Just as Boaz's reapers had greeted him. "May God bless you. He is not failed in his kindness to the living or to the dead." right? Naomi explained to her daughter-in-law, the man is related to us. He is one of our redeeming kinsmen. So the Hebrew is, he is a goel, right? A redeemer. This seems to be connected with the idea of Levirate marriage. In ancient Israel, if a man died without leaving children, then his brother would marry his widow and her children would be raised as his for the purpose of inheritance. Now, the truth is that you could say, since she was married to an Israelite, that she could be redeemed, although there it was in the Torah itself, it's only referring to a brother and not in this case to someone who is a more distant relation. And Ruth the Moabite said, he even told me, stay close by my workers until the harvest is finished. And Naomi answers her, it is best, daughter, that you go out with his girls and not be annoyed at some other field. So she stayed close to the maidservants of Boaz, gleaned until the barley harvest and the wheat harvest were finished. And then she stayed home with her mother-in-law. Right? So that is Ruth the Reaper. And that is the end of chapter 2. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen for the moment, and I will open up the view. And any questions on chapter 2 before we move on? Questions or observations? Saul.
What was the first sentence again? Naomi, Meida, the Isha, Ish Gibor, Chayil. Where does the Boaz fit in here?
Well, Boaz is a Gibor Chayil. That's
okay.
That is what he is. So I think that idea. I mean, by the way, how does the ideal woman get referred to in the book of Proverbs? Eshet Chayil, right? Right. So this is a sense of not only a man of substance, but an Eshet Chayil is not a wealthy woman, although she's industrious and she does work, but there's a sense of stature.
Good.
Hannah, did you have something? Go ahead.
Yes, I'm wondering how aware people were of the prohibition against having a Moabite in their community.
Well, so that's a question. That is a question.
Didn't seem to mind or didn't know, or didn't care.
Well, yes. So, but it's striking from the point, and we're going to see, I think, how much this prohibition gets disregarded as we come to the end. I'll leave it there for now. Anything else? Let's go on because I don't want to run out of time, and we will. We're going to go over. I don't think there's any way around it. Okay, so we'll change back to this view, and I'll share screen again. And okay, chapter 3. Naomi says to her, again, daughter, I must seek a home for you. Right? Again, the word is manoach, a place of rest, a place where you can be settled. Now, there is our kinsman Boaz, whose girls you are close to. He'll be winnowing barley on the threshing floor tonight. Right? So the harvest is at an end. And the way this works is that you take the sheaves of barley and you do this at night when there's some wind, right? And you thrash them and the chaff blows away and the barley falls down. So she says, Naomi, right? This is really striking. She tells her what to do: bathe, anoint yourself, dress up, go to the threshing floor, right? So, put on your makeup, girl, and your perfume and your nice clothes, because I want to find a husband for you. Go to the threshing floor, but don't disclose yourself to the man, meaning Boaz, until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he lies down, go over, uncover his feet and lie down. He'll tell you what to do. So, right? All right. So she says to her mother-in-law, I will do everything you tell me. Well, let's see, actually, if we read it closely, whether she does. She went down to the threshing floor, just as her mother-in-law had instructed her. Right? So, and she will see what happens. Boaz ate and drank in a cheerful mood, went to lie down beside the grain pile. She went over stealthily, uncovered his feet, and lay there. In the middle of the night, the man gave a start and pulled back because there was a woman lying at his feet, right? Right, he wakes up. Who are you? He asks. And she replies, I am your handmaid Ruth. Spread over your robe over your handmaid, for you are a redeeming kinsman. Right. Now, what did Naomi tell her to do?
Lie down beside him.
Lie down. He will tell you what to do, right? In other words, go lie down and wait. She doesn't wait. She actually takes the initiative and she says, spread your robe over me, right? Remember, right? And look at the Hebrew. Your robe is kanafecha, your wings, right? In other words, just as Ruth has come under the wings of God, now she is asking Boaz to spread his wing over her, because why? You are a redeemer, right? So most commentaries read this in a very straightforward way. She is proposing marriage to him. She's asking him to marry her, right? Not waiting, right? He says, be blessed of the Lord. Again, this guy, bless God's blessing. Your greatest deed of chesed, of kindness, greater than the first. You haven't turned to a younger man, whether rich or poor. I'm an old guy, right? And you chose me. Have no fear, my daughter. I will do on your behalf whatever you ask. I'll do what you told me, right? Not do what he tells you. I'll do what you told me. All the elders of the town know what a fine woman you are. But while it is true that I am a redeeming kinsman, there's another one closer than me, right? Someone else who actually has a greater right to serve in this role. He says, stay the night. In the morning, I will act as a redeemer. If he will act as a redeemer, good, let him redeem. He'll become married to you. But if he doesn't want to act as a redeemer, I will do so myself, as the Lord lives. Chai Adonai, he's taking an oath, lie down until the morning. She lays down. She rose before one person could distinguish another. For he thought, let it not be known the woman came to the threshing floor. He's concerned about her reputation. And he says, hand me the shawl you were wearing. She holds it out. He gives her 6 measures of barley, and he puts it on her back, and she goes to town. Comes to her mother-in-law. How is it with you, daughter? And she told her all that the man had done for her. And she added, he gave me these 6 measures of barley, saying to me, do not go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. Now, did he actually say that? We don't see it. And it seems like she wants Naomi rather, to think about Boaz as someone who is thinking about her. All right. And Naomi says, stay here till you learn how the matter turns out. The man will not rest. He will settle it today. Okay, so the scene is set now for its final denouement, and we'll see that in chapter 4. Before we do, questions or comments? Anything at all? Marilyn, go ahead. Unmute, please.
Is it usual for the woman to propose to the
No,
man?
no, I don't think so. I don't think it's usual at all. And I think this is a sense Ruth is now kind of empowered. We see her taking control of her situation. And perhaps Boaz needs that. Because Boaz, you get this sense you've done a great chesed to me because you haven't gone to a younger man, whether richer or poorer. He wouldn't presume, given their age difference, perhaps, to do such a thing. Any other comments? I think it's striking. Saul.
Yeah, in verse 12, Gam yesh goel karov mimeni. Is that referring to God or is that referring to?
No. That there is another kinsman who is a closer relation to you than I am, right? And therefore he would have first rights, because this also involves acquiring land, right? So he would have the right to do that before I would. He's the closer kinsman in that sense. Sandy.
What did Naomi think was going to happen? I mean, she told Ruth to lie down and
Yes. So I think it is a matter here of Boaz's status as really a righteous man that leads her not to worry about what's going to happen. But there is this undertone, remember what Boaz had said to her, I'll make sure the men don't molest you, right? There is that sense that Boaz is a person who cares about these things. And it's clear that he could have taken advantage of her. It's the middle of the night when he wakes up and he said, "Now sleep here," And so we're seeing revealed here the character of Boaz as well as the character of Naomi. Good. Anything else? Okay, so let's go back and let me share my screen one more time. Okay, so Boaz had gone to the gate and sat down there, right? So all transactions, financial transactions, take place in the gate of the city. And he calls the guy who is the redeemer, the closer redeemer, and he says, come over here and sit down, so-and-so. In Hebrew, ploni almoni. Ploni almoni is like, Joe Blow, right? It's like a way of saying that a person has no name. And remember how important names have been here. So why don't we get a name? Because he is not going to be willing to do, in some sense, what he's obligated to do as a redeemer. And so he loses his name here. And Boaz calls 10 elders to come together and says, be seated. This is, according to the rabbis, they give several different ones, but this is one of the basis of a minyan. He needs 10. He says to the Redeemer, Naomi, now returned from the country of Moab, must sell a piece of land which belonged to our kinsman Elimelech. I thought I should disclose it to you and say, acquire it in the presence of the people seated here, in the presence of the elders. If you are willing to redeem it, redeem. If you will not redeem, tell me that I may know, for there is no one to redeem but you, and I come next. And he says, I'll redeem it. Right? It looks like Boaz is done, but then Boaz throws in a kicker. When you acquire property from Naomi and from Ruth the Moabite, now he's introducing that she also has a hold, you must acquire the wife of the deceased, and that is to provide for her, so as to perpetuate the name of the deceased on his estate, And the Redeemer says, I'm not going to do that, lest I impair my own estate. In other words, he's willing to redeem it if it is financially beneficial, but it's not, so he has no interest in redeeming. You take over, right? So this is the difference between a person who is a Baal Chesed, a person who shows Chesed and kindness, and someone who is just concerned with the legalities here and says, well, I don't have to do it, and I'm not about to have it cost me. And this is what was formerly done in Israel in the case of redemption. To validate any transaction, one man would take off his sandal and hold it, hand it to the other, and that was the practice. So this idea, which in Hebrew is called kinyan, or purchase, continues to this day in some circles, that when you're transferring land, if you're transferring an object, if you're selling someone something, you can give them the object and it's done. But what about if you're transferring land? You can't pick up the land and hand it to him. So it's done symbolically here with the sandal, which I guess can walk on the land. And Boaz says to the elders, you are witnesses, I am acquiring from Naomi all the land that belonged to Elimelech and Chilion and Machlon. And I am acquiring Ruth the Moabite, the wife of Machlon, as my wife, so that the name of the deceased will not disappear from among his kinsmen, from the gate of the hometown. You are witnesses. And the people at the gate and the elders say, we are. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who built up the house of Israel. Prosper in Ephratah, perpetuate your name in Bethlehem. And may your house be like the house of Perez, who Tamar bore to Judah through the offspring which the Lord will give you by this one woman. Boaz marries Ruth, she becomes his wife. Now he sleeps with her, and the Lord let her conceive, and she bore a son. The women say to Naomi, blessed be the Lord who has not withheld a redeemer from you. May his name be perpetuated in Israel. He will renew your life and sustain your old age, for he is born of your daughter-in-law, who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons. Naomi takes the child, holds it to its bosom, and she becomes its foster mother. And the women give him a name, saying, a son is born to Naomi, and they call him Oved. He was the father of Jesse, who was the father of David. This is the line of Perez, and we get this whole now lineage going all the way back through to Boaz, to Oved, to Jesse, to David. And that is the rest of the story, as they say. So let me stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to open it up. Go ahead, Carol.
I wanted to know if the custom that they had, or whatever you would call it, of a man marrying his brother's wife if she died, so that he could keep up the lineage and the family.
Yes. Good. So there is already in biblical times, there is something that can be done if the brother doesn't want to do this. He does, and the Torah talks about it. He does a ceremony called chalitza, which is a symbolic way of releasing her. It also is a little degrading to him. She's supposed to spit at him, right? Because he hasn't done his duty. That becomes, in rabbinic times, the norm. In fact, they say that he is not allowed to marry his brother's wife in this way, but actually must do chalitza. But in the time of this story, it would seem that it was expected, or at least the person, even in the time of the Torah, he had a choice. So here too, he has a choice. Okay, any other questions, comments? All right, I want to come back. Good, Saul.
Yeah, when I saw the words Adonai Imachem, this is what the Sephardim say before they do
Yes.
the Torah blessing. Adonai Imachem.
Yes, and it's clearly here. It's from here. It's used in that context. Okay, why is Ruth read on the holiday of Shavuot? And I want to give you several answers. One is that it takes place at the harvest. It's all about harvest, and this is a harvest festival. Secondly, and it actually takes place between the harvests, right? It's just as Shavuot is the end of the harvest season and Pesach is the beginning of the harvest season. So there's the agricultural background, which is very strong here. Secondly, looking at Ruth as a convert, what happens to the people of Israel at Sinai? It is a kind of conversion, as they now formally accept God as their God, and they bind themselves to that acceptance. So that's another layer here. And then finally, there's a brilliant contemporary scholar of Torah in the broad sense named Aviva Zornberg, who I heard give a lecture on this once and actually has written several books, which I would recommend to you. Genesis, the beginning of desire, is really an excellent commentary on Genesis, and there are others. Anyway, she says that this is about the triumph of chesed over law. Right? Remember the Torah, Moabite cannot come into the community of Israel. And yet, because of the extraordinary chesed, kindness, devotion that Ruth shows to her mother-in-law, it overcomes the barrier. And it becomes the counterpoint to the giving of the Torah, which is all about law. It is the tempering of law. It is justice and mercy together, which I think is a really profound insight. The rabbis are troubled by this, and they say, well, when it says a Moabite, it really means a Moabite man and not a woman, because they have to somehow resolve this problem of how a Moabite could come into the community. But I think it's an extraordinary story. And what's even more extraordinary, this Moabite has a child who is a progenitor of the king of the Messiah, David, who himself is a progenitor of the Messiah. It all comes from a Moabite, right? And what is the role of the Moabite, of the Messiah? To bring redemption to the world. So this sense of a goel, of a redeemer, works its way all the way through to the end of the line. Not only is this Moabite not excluded from the community of Israel, she serves as a pivotal point, bringing on the kingship of David, the restoration of the kingdom, the people returning to the land, the founding of Jerusalem, and eventually to the coming of the Messiah, who will be a direct descendant of David. Okay, so I know that Sandy, you wanted to share a screen, and I invite you to do that now.
Well, first, wait.
Sure.
Okay, sure. You're okay. First of all, on behalf of everybody, we want to thank Rabbi Warmflesh for this wonderful season of Torah classes.
Wow, and you're very welcome.
We really, really appreciate it. I am going to read a poem of thanks from us, from the whole class, and then Hannah will say a few words.
Okay.
So I'm going to share screen. Ode to Rabbi Warmflesh.
Oh, guarding carefully and safely.
Thank you, Warmflesh, for guiding us carefully and safely together through the wilderness to the promised land. We traveled many miles over many months over the hot desert sand. You led us through numbers. We started with the census addition and ended with the land division. Giving land to Zelophehad's daughters was God's decision. Moses gave to the 2.5 tribes land east of the Jordan River on the condition that these men would lead the Canaan fighting expedition. Our journey was colorful. The heifer was red, and on the tzitzit fringe was a blue thread. There was a potion that could cause a woman's belly to swell. In the desert, we were refreshed with water from Miriam's wells. Pillar of cloud led us by day, pillar of fire by night. God supplied manna and quail, most welcome sights.
Beautiful pictures. And scouts returned. Beautiful
And
report.
scouts returned with an evil report, spreading their fears. Thus, God kept the Israelites in the desert for 40 years. Moses dealt with challenges, big and small. With God's help, he heroically managed it all. We witnessed jealousy, leprosy, and plagues. Thankfully, we went unscathed. We met biting snakes and a miraculous talking donkey. Indeed, it was an incredible journey. We learned 2 origins of why we pray 3 times a day. Beheld 10 miracles, according to Maimonides, that God created at twilight before the first Shabbat night. We even took some detours in time and space. First to Shushan, where Queen Esther bravely saved the Jewish people from the evil Haman. Second, to Egypt, where the Israelites witnessed God's might. You shared your insights on the Haggadah, helping us to prepare for the Seder nights. Third, we relived the awesome giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. Last, to Moab, witnessing Ruth's devotion to Naomi. Throughout the book of Numbers, you led our challenging trek. At the end, you wished us, Hazak, Hazak, V'nitz Hazek. To you, we enthusiastically wish it back. We look forward to all we will hear and see when we study the book of Deuteronomy. Thank you, God, for sharing your knowledge, wisdom, and great insights every step of the way. You always enlightened us, inspired us, and answered our every query. We loved your beautifully taught Torah classes, during which you provided fascinating drash and midrash. Rabbi, it is our true joy to study with and learn from you. We are deeply grateful for your classes that were awesome, thereby helping our understanding of Torah grow and blossom. With heartfelt appreciation, your Tuesday morning Zoom Bible class.
Oh, lovely.
That's great. I tell you.
It's beautiful.
Yes.
Thank you. And Hannah will now speak.
Yes, I want to thank you, Sandy, for that amazing poem.
Yes.
Well,
It was
thank you for
fabulous.
your feedback,
Yeah.
Hannah. So I tweaked it here and there.
Yeah, and on behalf of everyone in the class, Rabbi, I'd like to present you with some gifts. They are virtual. One of them is you will be receiving a gift card, an Amazon card, but virtually. It will appear magically, I guess, as an email. And second, we are getting you a gift for Shavuot that will be delivered to you tomorrow. So I'll let that be a
Wow.
surprise. And we really
Wow.
thank you for sharing your knowledge with us in such a wonderful, relatable way. You're very patient with us. We appreciate that, how you answer all our questions.
Wow. All I can say is that the greatest gift you're giving me is being my students, because I so much love teaching, and you've given me an opportunity to do it. And also that your questions, which have really been wonderful, have also helped me to think more deeply about the stuff that I'm teaching. And so that's been a great gift to me as well. We are going to take a break. I'll come back at the end of the summer with beginning Deuteronomy. Usually I wait till after the holidays, but the holidays, as you may know, are really not till the end of September. So my plan is to begin a couple of weeks before that. I'll probably have something to say about the holidays and really begin the book of Deuteronomy. And I hope to see you all then. please, I'll remind you then too, but spread the word because, the more the merrier, as they say. So I want to wish you, first of all, Chag Sameach for Shavuot. Make sure you get to shul this weekend so you can hear and listen to the book of Ruth and a restful summer. You have my email, and I invite you, because I keep sending you these reminder emails. So you have my email, and anything that occurs to you about what we've studied or anything else, if you write to me over the coming months, I'm happy, as always, to respond. In the meantime, have a great day, and I will see you a couple of months. Bye, everybody, and thanks again.
Chag Sameach.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach. Chag Sameach.
Why are we reading Ruth at Shavuot?